Welcome back. By now we understand the basics of credit default swaps. We're also familiar with some of the jargons associated with CDS. Therefore, now is a good time to look at the standard CDS contract. What is a standard CDS contract and why is it important? Well, before we look at what a standard contract is, let me tell you why it is important. It's important because almost all CDS contracts that are traded in the market today are standard CDS contracts, which means the coupons paid on the CDS are standardized, as are the dates for maturity and coupon payment. This standardization took place after the 2008 financial crisis, when reforms were introduced in the market, after it was found that CDS played a major role in the collapse of Lehman Brothers and the market crash that followed. The biggest and most important among those reforms was quite literally and aptly called the CDS Big Bang Protocol. The Big Bang Protocol was introduced in 2009 to improve the market's infrastructure and functioning. It marked the biggest chapter in CDS history and transformed the CDS market forever. Let us now look at what the Big Bang Protocol was all about. One, it introduced standard CDS contracts in the market, which we're now going to see in detail. Secondly, it made the settlement of CDS more uniform and predictable. A clear set of rules was introduced for auctioning a CDS contract when a company went into default. Thirdly, the protocol introduced something known as determination committees. A determination committee is going to have the final word on whether a credit or succession event has occurred and also oversee the CDS auction process in that case. Now, this was a very high-level overview of the Big Bang Protocol. We're obviously not going to get into the minute details here because we're going to be mostly dealing in the present, what CDS is today rather than what it was 10 years back. Right then, let us now look at what a standard CDS contract is and what exactly is standardized. Firstly, the maturity dates are fixed. There are 4 dates in a year on which a CDS matures. These are March 20th, June 20th, September 20th, and December 20th. So, if you buy or sell a 5-year CDS on, let's say, October 4, 2016, it is supposed to run until October 4, 2021. That is when the 5-year period is completed. But it will mature on the next standard maturity date, which is December 20th, 2021. Now, like maturity dates, the dates for premium or coupon payment are also standardized, and premiums are paid on the same 4 dates as the maturity dates. So, if you bought a CDS contract on, let's for a moment imagine the reference entity was Glencore, the global minerals giant. If you bought the Glencore 5-year CDS on February 4, 2016, you have to pay your first premium on the next premium payment date, which is fixed and which happens to be March 20th, 2016. Just like in the case of bonds. Along with the dates, the premiums themselves are also standardized. Notice I'm using the word premium and coupon interchangeably here because they're essentially the same. So, the premiums themselves are also standardized. In North America, CDS have premiums of either 100 basis points or 500 basis points per annum. In Europe, premiums are typically 25 basis points or 100 basis points, but can also be 500 or even 1000 basis points, depending on the reference entity's credit quality. In Japan, premiums are usually 25 basis points, 100 basis points, or 500 basis points. In sovereign CDS, some highly rated sovereigns trade at 25 basis points, while the others trade at 100 basis points. The other important feature of a standard CDS contract is something known as payment of first full coupon. To understand what is payment of first full coupon, let's go back to our example on Glencore, where you bought the CDS on February 4th. As we said, the coupon payment dates are fixed, and the first coupon is due on March 20th, which is the next standard coupon date. On this date, you, the buyer, have to pay full 3 months of coupon, even though you enjoyed credit protection only for a month and a half. Seems unfair, isn't it? Well, not really. We'll see why. So what happens here is exactly what happens in case of bonds. On March 20th, the buyer will pay full 3 months premium, which comes to 125 basis points. That is, a 1/4 of 500 basis points, the annual premium. The seller will return the premium for the days when the buyer did not have credit protection. That is, from December 21st to February 3rd. So the seller pays back 44 days premium, which, if you do the math, equals to roughly 60 basis points. But the key here is that the seller will return this premium right at the start of the trade. So the buyer receives this money up front the moment she enters into a CDS trade. By now you would have imagined that this payment is very similar to accrued interest in bonds. Sure enough, in case of CDS, it is known as an accrual payment. Now, although CDS carries standard premiums or coupons, they're still quoted and traded in the old-fashioned way, that is, in terms of spreads. Let us take Glencore again as the example. In early 2015, after the crash in metal prices, Glencore's 5-year CDS was trading at 757 basis points at one point, but it still carried a standard premium of only 500 basis points, which means the cost of credit protection on Glencore was 757 basis points, but the buyer would be paying only 500 basis points in premium. Now, how's that possible? Why would someone sell a CDS at less than its market price? Well, here's what happens in reality. The actual cost of protection is what's quoted in the market, that is 757 basis points. But because the buyer is only paying 500 basis points, because that 500 basis points is fixed, so the seller will somehow need to be compensated for the difference, which is 257 basis points. Otherwise, the seller is not going to sell. And this difference is also compensated by paying an upfront fee at the time of entering into the CDS trade. Now, in our example, the CDS spread, which is the cost of credit protection, was greater than the standard coupon the buyer is supposed to pay. So the upfront fee will be paid by the buyer to the seller to compensate for this difference. But this upfront fee may just as well go in the reverse direction, meaning it can also be paid by the seller to the buyer. And that would happen when the CDS spread is less than the standard premium. So, if Glencore CDS were quoting at 357 basis points instead of 757, then the buyer ends up paying more than the cost of protection, because she still pays 500 basis points in premium. So in this case, it's going to be the seller who has to pay an upfront fee to settle the difference. Therefore, it should be clear to you by now that an upfront payment is always made when a CDS is traded. And there are two parts to this upfront payment. One is the accrual payment, that is the compensation to the buyer from the seller for the fact that the buyer pays the first coupon in full. The other is the difference between the CDS spread quoted in the market and its standard premium. The net of these two amounts can go in either direction. That is, it can go from the buyer to the seller or vice versa. Now, the calculation for accrual payment is pretty straightforward, as we've just seen. But calculation of the upfront fee for the difference between the CDS spread quoted in the market and its standard premium is inherently more complex. This difference needs to be calculated over the entire life of the contract. Therefore, it involves discounting the future differences back to their present value. It also takes into account the probability that the reference entity will default. That is, the probability that the premiums would not be paid for the entire life of the contract. We will explain this calculation in the next part, that is part 4 of our series.